Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. I'm Marco In. The first trial in Europe of a high-ranking Syrian regime official saw an intelligence officer sentenced to life in prison for crimes against humanity. In Koblenz, Anwar Raslan, former head of interrogation at a detention center in Damascus, was convicted on 4,000 counts of torture and the murder of 27 detainees. Russia and China have long vetoed referring Syria to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, so German prosecutors have pursued the case under the principle of universal jurisdiction. It's been a long road to justice, and lawyers and victims hope it's just the first step towards more convictions. Since 2013, hundreds of thousands of Syrians have settled in Europe, with some torturers managing to slip through the net. But their days at large could be numbered, as those hunting down Syrian war criminals are stepping up their game. This report by Fernand Van Tetz and Marine Pradel, and a word of warning for you, some of the images in this report are disturbing.
Where the Mosel and Rhine rivers meet lies Koblenz. Almost 4,000 kilometers separate this picturesque German city from the Syrian capital, Damascus. But it is here that the trial against the first senior Syrian regime official for crimes against humanity is taking place. This morning, dozens of victims, family members of the disappeared, and their lawyers queue up outside the regional courthouse to hear the verdict, almost 2 years after the start of the trial.
I don't think I will have ability to be beside the people waiting from 6 hours.
They've all come to hear the German judge utter the words guilty and crimes against humanity. The man in the dock is Anwar Raslan, the head of interrogations at Branch 251, a detention and torture center in Damascus.
Hold the system, hold those group, machine who arrested Syrians, tortured them, killed them, those my enemy, this structure. He is part of this structure. He is not my personal enemy.
And yet, this Syrian lawyer, a survivor of the regime's prisons, has a very personal history with the accused. Anwar al-Buni was abducted on the streets of Damascus in 2006 by a certain Anwar Raslan. After his release from prison, he fled to Berlin along with his wife and children. In 2014, they were put up in this refugee center.
Here, when I arrived, I left in this apartment in the second floor.
It was 3 years after the start of the uprising against the Assad regime, just before hundreds of thousands of Syrians started to flee to Europe and Germany.
I came to the gate here to go outside home, and he was in this small street the first time I saw him.
He was face to face with the man who arrested him, Anwar Raslan.
From his look, I knew he recognized me.
He didn't know it yet, but other human rights defenders were already on the trail of Raslan. When Anwar al-Buni was called in by German police to make a statement, he only confirmed investigators' suspicions.
They called me to give my testimony and ask if there is any witnesses or victims want to join to the investigation. And for sure we help to contact the victims and witnesses, because most of them, I knew them before because I defended them when they be arrested in this branch.
In his small Berlin office, Anwar al-Buni compiles testimonies against Raslan, as well as dozens of other Syrian war criminals now present on European soil. Barely a day goes by without a tip-off.
On the messenger, there is somebody who located one of the criminal who arrested them and tortured them, and they recognized his name and his face in Sweden, and they want to do something about.
Just now you received the message?
Yeah, just now I received a message.
Did this happen often, that you get messages like this?
Every day we have messages from people.
All across Europe?
Yeah.
In 2019, Anwar Raslan was arrested along with one of his subordinates at Branch 251. Preparations for a trial get underway, not at the International Criminal Court because of multiple vetoes from China and Russia, but a German trial with German lawyers like Patrick Croker. He represents 9 of the 24 survivors who are joint plaintiffs in the case.
Take back control, and then we can make it a bit smaller. So basically, in international justice, there is this idea that if crimes are so grave that they become international crimes, such as crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide, there is a principle called universal jurisdiction, which means that these crimes can be prosecuted anywhere in the world. Of course, it still depends very much on the state, on how each state incorporates this principle of universal jurisdiction into their own law. And Germany has done so in a rather broad way. And that's why the federal prosecutor in Germany could start to investigate the Syrian cases as early as 2011.
Patrick Croker has been working on this case for 4 years. Convincing his clients to testify wasn't easy. Despite having fled to Europe, the fear of the regime remains.
The secret services, the mukhabarat, they come to your door, to your father's, nephews, brothers, mother's door, and they just say, look, we hear that, your son or your niece wants to testify in the Koblenz court, and we're not really happy about that. You should really consider talking to that person or so. And this is, it's clear to everyone that the next step might be that this person could be ending up in detention and being tortured.
Ruwaida Kanan is one of these survivors. Today, she is a political refugee in France and a university student. But at the start of the revolution in Syria, this young radio journalist dreamt of democracy and freedom. In 2012, she was arrested in Damascus and taken to Branch 251.
The moment I arrived at Branch 251, the torture started. The detainees were treated like they were things, not people. For them, there was no limit to the pain they could make you suffer. When they took me to be interrogated, they beat me. And I saw young men hanging from the ceiling by their wrists, side by side, naked, being beaten.
After Raslan was arrested, Ruwaida went to Berlin to be interviewed by the police. The 10 hours of questioning were intimate and painful.
It was tiring both psychologically and physically to recall details that I tried to forget.
In November 2020, she took the stand in Koblenz. Opposite her in the dock sat Anwar Raslan.
I was looking at him the whole time. I wanted him to look at me. I wanted to tell him, look, we're both here in court. But during the 4 hours of testimony, he never looked at me, not once.
The biggest challenge of the trial was to prove the widespread and systematic nature of the torture, as that would classify these crimes as crimes against humanity. This storage room in a Western European city contains 900 kilos of paper, over 1 million documents. the administrative record of the Syrian death machine, including orders signed by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad himself. Nerima Jalacic is a director at CIJA, the Commission for International Justice and Accountability. She's one of the 3 public faces of the organization. Tens of other staff members are forced to stay anonymous.
We've had our people targeted both nationally in Syria and internationally. So we have to have very stringent rules in place, and when those are breached, we have to change. We've had to move and change locations, including countries, on a number of occasions in our existence.
CIJA managed to exfiltrate most of these documents from official Syrian buildings before 2016, when huge swaths of territory were controlled by the opposition. In these files, CIJA found interrogation reports signed by Anwar Raslan.
CIJA's documents are important not only because they show the direct involvement of the accused, but also because they show how the role of Raslan and his unit fits in that wide and large archipelago of violence and torture that was deployed by the regime.
Another key element for proving the systematic nature of the crimes were the Caesar photos, named after the photographer from military intelligence who smuggled them out of Syria. The photos show the bodies of more than 6,000 Syrians who were starved and tortured to death in the regime's detention centers.
Das ist blunt force trauma to the neck with compression of the neck tissue.
This coroner spent 3 years analyzing the almost 27,000 photos in the file. In court, he clinically presented his conclusions.
In
the end, it even meant, because we looked at images over a long period of time, that we sometimes had the problem that we thought we'd seen a case before. I thought I'd made a mistake and was assessing the same image again. But then, at some point, it became clear that, yes, the cases are simply similar within a place of detention, and also between the different prisons. And from that, we deduced evidence that there is obviously a kind of system of how these people were treated and how these people were injured.
Anwar Raslan admits torture was systematic, but denies any personal involvement. In Paris, Rowaida Kanan is trying to forget. But she has decided to face her torturer one last time.
I find it difficult to get excited because I think of my friends who are still in prison. Would they be happy with what we're doing here? I don't know.
Thursday, 13th of January. After more than 100 days of hearings, the judges have come to a decision.
I've tried to sleep, but I just couldn't. I kept thinking about what could happen today in court.
2 hours later, the verdict is announced. Life imprisonment for Anwar Raslan.
It's great. The court specified the fact that the security state commits these crimes. This is a great day for Syria. I don't think there is a single country that respects human rights that should talk to the Assad regime anymore.
More than 7 years after having crossed his tormentor in the street, Anwar al-Buni can close this chapter and focus on the next.
There is many cases come and become in Austria, in Germany, in Sweden, in Netherlands, in Belgium. also in Switzerland. So we continue our mission. It's not job for me, it's mission, it's life. For that, as I continue my life, as this process continue.
Do you think one day Bashar al-Assad will face a court?
I not think, I am sure. It's not hope for me, it's goal.
A week later, a trial will open in Frankfurt against a Syrian doctor accused of killing demonstrators in a hospital on behalf of the regime. He, too, thought he would be able to start a new life in Europe.
Fernand Van Tetz and Marine Pradel with that report. You can, of course, see it again on the website france24.com. This is Reporters. Thank you for watching. Join us next time for another in-depth look at the stories that matter here on France 24.